You know, every week on Wednesday or so, Karen, the secretary here, hands me the bulletin to take a look at it. This week she handed it to me kind of like this. I said, "What's the matter with you?" And she said, "I know you're going to hate the bulletin cover. Actually, it's my favorite bulletin cover in 10 years. All the cows. And I love the skinny ones. They're looking good. Well, this is from our first reading, which I told her was what I would be talking about, so that's why she went looking for skinny and fat cows, because it's the dream that Pharaoh had, that Joseph interpreted, that there were these fat cows, and then there were 7 skinny cows, and the skinny cows ate the fat cows, and then there was just skinny cows, because they didn't make them fat. And Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Well, here's what I think your dream means." Now this was a good interpretation, because it got him a really big job. He said, "Here's what I think your dream means. There are going to be 7 bounteous years in Egypt. 7 bounteous years, where there's more than enough. We're overflowing with food and riches. But after that, there will be 7 lean years." His point being that we have an opportunity now to store up, to prepare, to make a plan for these years that we know are coming. These 7 lean years. And in fact, that did happen. There were 7 bounteous years and 7 lean years. But as I think about this lesson from Joseph and his conversation with Pharaoh about his dream, then I start thinking about the church. And when I think about the church, usually I think about not just St. Matthew's, but the ELCA, well, you know, the Lutherans. I'm thinking about the Lutherans. There's many, many other parts of the church, but the Lutherans are the people I talk to a lot. I think about the Lutherans, and I think, what years are we in the church? I don't think we're in the 7 bounteous years, the 7 years of abundance, the 7 years of overflowing riches. I don't think that we're in those years, but I think that we were. I think that we were. And I think that you and I, and all the people of St. Matthew's, and all the people of the Lutheran Church in this country, you and I are the recipients of people who, like Joseph, understood that there were hard times coming. Maybe they didn't understand that. But they practiced stewardship anyway. They practiced stewardship. We worship in a building that we could not afford as a congregation. The ELCA, our church, the Lutheran Church, we make use of schools and universities that we could not afford if we had to build them today. I mean, with the resources, I'm not saying the resources we have, but with the resources people are willing to spend on the church. It's amazing to me to think about this period of time between about 1870 and 1920. In that period of time, in the Lutheran Church, the church that many of us have been members of our whole life, in that period of time, from about 1870 and then it heated up until it started to cool down in about 1920, in that period of time, almost everything that we have in the United States as Lutherans was established or built, including this congregation. Not this building, but this congregation. But it's not just St. Matthew's. Look, when you're at a Lutheran school next time, at a seminary, or at a college, take a look at the cornerstone and check out the date of establishment. Likely it will be between 1870 and 1920. During that period of time was also when not only churches like St. Matthew's, but congregations across St. Paul and Minneapolis and across this country, but especially in the Midwest, were established. The same people were building, at the same time, hospitals, Hospitals like still exist in the Twin Cities, but are no longer really run by the church, like Bethesda, like Fairview. Hospitals that were built, check out the dates on the cornerstones, at the very same time as this congregation and others like it, and as our colleges and our universities. And then there's one more thing that's just amazing to me. Now, you would think that during this time of abundance, you would think that the people would have been about tapped out. But during that same period of time, a little bit later, starting in about 1885, 1890, until the first part of this 20th century, we sent, as Lutherans, more missionaries overseas than we ever have since that time. We have trouble doing it now. As the Lutheran Church, we have trouble paying for it. Our staff in Chicago has remained fairly large, but the actual people working overseas are smaller than they've been since the middle 1800s. That is an amazing thing for me to think about. It's not like this decade built the churches, and then this decade later built the hospitals, and this decade later built the universities, the colleges, and the seminaries, and then after that they decided to send people overseas. Actually, those people who were alive between 1870 and 1920 did all. Every bit. Does that blow your mind? Who do you think has more money, us or them?
Us.
Thank you. I know the rest of you know the truth, but only one would say it. Us. Of course we do. Of course we do. We are in lean times, though, now. Lean times. Lean, I think, in mission. Lean, I think, in vision. Lean times, I think. And not 7 years, but 17 or 70 years of lean times in wondering what to do. The church is not the same as it was in the first part of the last century. I mean, I'm still talking about the Lutheran Church. It's the only one I feel like I know enough about I can stand up in front of a group and talk about. We're not the same church. Our bishop, Mark Hansen, the bishop of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, he says, Lutherans are only barely coming to grips. We're only barely beginning to come to grips with the idea that there are no more boats coming from Europe. No more ships coming from Scandinavia. No more ships leaving ports carrying Germans to the United States. Lutherans in this country are only barely now, just now, beginning to come to grips with that. That was our mission for about 80 years, 100 years in this country. Receiving fellow countrymen into the church. There really was no talk about, should we talk to the Italians about the gospel? There really was no talk about whether or not we should talk to the Chinese people living in the other part of town about the gospel. There really was no talk about that. And the reason that there wasn't is that the Lutheran Church, one of the reasons, had all it could do to receive the people who were just like them, who were still coming. They were still coming. Now there are corners of the Lutheran Church, smaller and smaller and smaller corners, but there are corners of the Lutheran Church where this is actually still happening, where there are people still coming. I worked in one for a while in Lino Lakes. Before I was here, I served as an interim pastor for about 8 months in Lino Lakes. I have never been paid so much to do so little. Well, those wonderful people, wonderful congregation. Some of them have relatives here. It's anointed me to